Hi, this is Jenny from Designs with Paper. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. I have a card video-ish for you today, so get comfy and let's get crafty. Today I will be talking about embossing folders. So there are two types of embossing folders. There are 3D and traditional embossing folders. And in my craft room, embossing folders are probably the least utilized tool, but they give you the most bang for your buck. Embossing folders are relatively inexpensive and they offer a tremendous amount of detail. This particular type of embossing folder is a background or a scene embossing folder, and all embossing folders have a raised edge and an indented edge so that when you put the paper in the folder and run it through your die cut machine, you get that embossed image onto your paper. This particular embossing folder is 6x6. I believe it's a Stampin' Up! Embossing folder. I've had it in my stash for a while. Another style of embossing folder is this 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch. It makes a card front. This is a geometric, it's a honeycomb pattern. Same thing, raised and embossed edges on each side. Embossing folders also come with words on them. This is with sympathy folder from Doris. It makes a really soft and understated sympathy card because let's face it, a sympathy card should be soft and understated. I have a couple of other word embossing folders, and they are created so that the words are raised off of the front of the card after you emboss it. This is a Cuttlebug Happy Birthday embossing folder, and it does the same thing. It raises the words up off of the top of or front of the card. Also in my stash, I have these little tag embossing folders. The first two I'm showing you here are from Sizzix. They are a thank you set. I don't know that I've ever actually used these two little ones, but I have used the bigger one that they came with a whole bunch of times. And they are just the perfect little tag size. The other small ones I have here are from Stampin' Up! And they make a frame, and they are sized to just about perfectly go into the center of a card front. So that was very well thought out, very well designed. The other style of another style of embossing folders are these edge strips. So I have a couple of different sets of edge strips that create a little detailed design that you can put on the bottom or the top or the side, or heck, all up and down the front of your card pattern, whatever, or card front, whatever you want to do. And it just creates like a row of buttons or a row of stitching. Another type of embossing folder is a 3D embossing folder. So this is a memory box. I think it's the Daisy embossing folder, and it creates an embossed image that has multiple levels of dimension. This is also a 3D embossing folder. It is Altenew's Brick Wall embossing folder. So same thing, multiple layers of dimension. This is my die cut machine. I work with the Spellbinders Platinum. This is the large base. It's the platform is basically the size of a regular piece of cardstock, 8.5 by 11 US cardstock. And I am going to attempt to emboss some of these embossing folders without shaking the camera. My camera boom is attached to my desk, so knock wood, it doesn't get too seasicky. So the first embossing folder I want to run through my die cut machine is this altenew 3D embossing folder. I am going to put a larger piece of paper than I need through this embossing folder because I can trim it down. On the 3D embossing folders in my die cut machine, I need the platform, and depending on the brand, a clear plate or a shim. I cannot remember for the life of me right now which altenew needs. And as I go to crank it through, obviously it doesn't need that much. It's just too hard. You should not be forcing this through your machine. Everybody's machine is going to be a little bit different depending on how old it is, what style it is, and how thick the cardstock is you're using. So I have taken out the shims and just run this embossing folder with my clear plate through my die cut machine. And I am running it slowly frontwards and backwards, not because you have to, because then my arm doesn't go, under the camera and block everything you can see. So hopefully you can see the texture there. I do have some photos at the end where you can see the texture just a little bit more. And here's the back side of that embossing folder where the grout is kind of sticking up. It's pretty cool. Again, this is the Altenew Brick Wall stamp embossing folder. The next one I want to run through is this Memory Box Daisy, and I am actually going to run it through on a piece of watercolor paper. Watercolor paper is a little bit thicker than traditional cardstock, so it will change what type of or how many shims I need. Also, memory box and 3D embossing folder are quite thick, and so I don't even need my clear plate. Like, you can see how much thicker that is than the altenew plate or embossing folder. I'm just going to send it through with a cardboard shim. And again, you should not have to force it. It should feel tight, but you should not be forcing this embossing folder through your machine. You do not want to break your machine. So just be aware of how your machine normally feels and when it starts to feel like it's too tight. Okay, so the dimension on this is kind of hard to see on the white paper, but it is pretty fabulous in real life. And I can't wait for you to see the pictures at the end. Again, that is memory box. Daisy, I think is the name for it. The next one I want to do is this word embossing folder. This is a Cuttlebug embossing folder, and it is roughly the size of a card front. One thing you should note is that when you run your card front through, like this piece of paper here was 4 by 5¼ inches. When you run it through an embossing folder, it does kind of shrink a little bit. Okay. This is 80-pound Stampin' Up! Cardstock, so I will be using 1 shim and my clear plate. And then I felt like it was just a little bit too easy. Like, it didn't quite slide, but it didn't quite grip. So I added 1 more piece of cardboard as a shim. My cardboard is just an old Cheerios box. I have used it enough times that it's probably not as thick as a cereal box used to be. That's why I have 2. And then again, this is a Cuttlebug plate, and you can see when I pull it out that the words are now raised up off of the background of the page. And this one is just happy birthday. It says happy birthday a whole bunch of different ways. And it is really hard to see on that lighter cardstock. I should have chosen some darker cardstock. The next one that I want to use is, I'm trying to remember, the stitching. So this is one of those edge embossing folders. And I'm going to grab a piece of green cardstock. And this folder I've chosen right here is a zigzag stitch. So it looks a little bit like sewing machine stitching, or it represents sewing machine stitching. It doesn't really look like sewing machine stitching because it's raised up off, not made holes with. I will again put my shims down and my clear plate. It doesn't really matter which order your shims and your clear plate are in necessarily, at least not in my machine and not for embossing folders. It's just getting the proper tension in that machine so that it can really squish that paper into the embossing folders. And then you can see kind of sort of that it has that zigzaggy look on the bottom of that cardstock. My camera angle is not real great. I apologize. It's a good thing there's pictures at the end, like I already said 100,000 times. I do want to show you this frame embossing folder. Again, this is an old Stampin' Up! One. I've seen them from other companies, but not anytime recently. But I haven't purchased new embossing folders except for my 3D ones in many years. So this card piece right here is 4¼ by 5½ inches. And this oval frame is going to just about be right in the middle. So it's kind of perfect for a sentiment that you want to be in the center of your cardstock. You could also take an oval die and cut out that embossed oval and add it to a card another way. I will go ahead and put my shims and my clear plate down and run that through my die cut machine. And so far, we're not doing too bad for shaking the table. It was pretty good. I know in the past when I've tried to use it to cut dies, it's too shaky. I have to cut that part out. So here is the oval, and you can see it's got like that imprinted oval plus a dotted edge around the outside. It's pretty cool. So these are just a couple of things you can do with embossing folders. Here's another trick. You can use embossing folders by inking them up. So this scene embossing folder, you kind of need to pay attention to which is actually the top and actually the bottom. In this embossing folder, the top of the image is actually the opened end, not the closed end. So what I am going to do is take this blue ink pad. I am using my Stampin' Up! Ink because they're my bigger pads. All of my other companies come in the little cubes, and that was going to take too long. And then I will grab this kind of tan colored ink and smush it along the bottom of the embossing folder. Sorry, I forgot what the word was. And then once I get those two kind of sort of blended together, I have another stamp. This is a Tim Holtz. It's one of his Christmas Stampers Anonymous collections. And I'm going to ink this deer up in a darker brown ink, and I'm going to stamp it onto my embossing folder. So when I move that stamp, you will be able to see the deer there in the embossing folder. So now the fun part is we're going to send this through the die cut machine with a piece of cardstock. This is a piece of 80-pound Neenah Solar White cardstock. I'm just going to place it in there. Don't move the paper once you get it in there when you've got the ink, because that's just that's just shenanigans right there. Now you can see that the ink has been pressed into that cardstock and the image is still there. So it looks like we've got a little bit of sky, a little bit of background, and the deer is hiding behind the trees. Super fun. Another thing you can do with your embossed images, and this is why I did this particular image on watercolor paper, is that you can color your embossed images. Now, I wanted to watercolor this flower. I have attempted to watercolor embossed images before. I did not have much luck, and I felt like it was probably because sending the watercolor paper through the die cut machine kind of flattened the texture. But I watched Therese Calvet, and I will link her video at the bottom. She did some watercoloring on die cuts, and I kind of thought I'm going to try that again. And it turned out much better than before using my watercolor pencils. Last time I tried it, I think I was trying to use like Zig markers or my altenew water markers, something like that. And it didn't work really well. I have taken 2 shades of brown and filled in the center, and I've taken an orange and a yellow and just kind of scribbled on the pencils. I didn't even fill in the whole image, and then used this water brush to spread that pigment around. And I am adding a little bit more brown to the center, and then I will move on to the stem and the leaves. I've also chosen 2 greens, and I did add more color onto the leaves just because there's more space. I did use 2 colors to kind of give that effect of shadow or light and dark, where the light would be hitting. And I did kind of smush it off of the embossed image a little bit, but I can clean that up with a wet paintbrush anytime. So let's go ahead and turn some of these into cards real quick. I need to trim down this flower image. The watercolor paper was 4.5 by 5.5 inches, and I need it to fit on the front of an A2 size card, because that's the card base I have on my desk. Now, I did bad math and didn't trim off enough the first time, so I will have to come back and trim a little bit more off. But my intent is to cut this panel down to make it an A2 size card, but a card front, so 4 inches across by 5.25 inches tall. I have a yellow card base that is Stampin' Up! Cardstock. I'm not sure the color. I would have to say probably crushed curry because it's kind of that dark yellow. I do really like the Stampin' Up! Cardstock colors. I like how the cardstock feels. It's nice and smooth. But mostly I like that I get 24 pieces of cardstock in my package for like $1.50 more than a lot of the other stores. So even though I would love to try other cardstocks, these are the ones I buy because I get more cardstock for my money. That's just me. And I like the colors, so win-win. Now that I have scored this card base, and I have realized I did not trim this down properly, I will go ahead and line that up in my trimmer and trim it down to 4 inches instead of 4.25, and it will fit a little bit better on the card front. I want to add this to my card base with my 3M foam tape, so I will flip this over and pull out my roll of foam tape. You can see that I attempted to use this cardstock once before, and paper has 2 sides. I will not be judgmental. I will use the front side of the card and the back side of the card if I need to. I'm going to use the grid lines on my work surface to line this up, and I didn't get it quite right, so I'll pull it off. Gratefully, you have a minute or 2 to do that before that tape really starts to stick. And then I have a beautiful sunflower card. I can add a sentiment to it anytime I need to, or whatever I need. I want to turn this scene into a card. I am going to make this a landscape style card, so it will be, the card will be 5.5 inches long by 4.25 inches tall, opposite my norm. This panel I'm going to cut down to 4 by 5.25, and I really needed to think about how much I was taking off each side, especially because that deer is right at the bottom. I didn't want to chop the deer in half. That would be kind of obnoxious. I have a piece of black cardstock on my desk that is cut the proper orientation, so this will become my cardstock or my card base, and it will make a landscape A2 size card. And this time I will be using liquid adhesive to adhere the card panel to the card base. When you have embossed card fronts or card panels, it's best to use a liquid adhesive or a foam tape. Tape runner doesn't always get into those grooves. Okay, so next let's take this happy birthday panel. I am trimming them down with my paper trimmer because I worry that running them back through my embossing or my die cut machine will flatten the embossing. I could, I suppose, trim them with like my A2 layer dies, but yeah, I was worried about going back through my embossing folder or my die cut machine and flattening that embossing. So that's why I'm using my trimmer to trim things down. That's why I'm doing bad math. I will glue this light purple happy birthday card front to a purple card base. And then I have the beginning of a card for one of the many, many people in my life who have birthdays. Here are a few pictures so that you can see the embossed images a little bit better. They do photograph better than they video. And this is the back side of that brick wall. I mean, it is just pretty phenomenal. Those 3D folders are pretty cool. And thank you so much for stopping by my channel. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a really fabulous day. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel and watching my video. I have linked a couple other videos here for you to watch, as well as a subscribe button. If you have not done so already, I would love it if you subscribe to my channel. And if you know somebody who would like it, please feel free to share. Have a great day.